Welcome to Drugs and Children, where we explore the secret world of youth substance abuse. Each year, countless numbers of children experiences the trauma of substance abuse. These are good children from good families that somehow slip through the cracks. We're going to try to explore the threats and challenges that they face and give you an idea of what you can do to help make their world safer. One way to get a feel for how substance abuse affects you is to look at what we're used to in Iowa, the idea of a tornado. When you look at a town that's been ravaged by a tornado, you see houses that are destroyed, you see houses that are damaged, and you see houses untouched as if by some miracle. Drugs move through our communities in the same way, and they're ever present and constantly challenging our children to make wise decisions. To understand some of these threats, we've asked Steve Lucan, the director of the Governor's Office of Drug Control Policy, to share what he believes are the most powerful and threatening agents in our society for our youth. Welcome, Steve. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Can you give us an idea of what you feel, what the top threats are in Iowa for children today?
Well, we have a lot of challenges that our youth face today. Probably one of the biggest ones, one of the most quickly emerging threats is prescription painkillers. These are commonplace in many people's homes. Unfortunately, this is a nationwide problem because they are very easily accessible. Friends are coming over to other kids' homes and taking them out of medicine cabinets. They're easy to transport, which also makes them a real big challenge. Another major challenge our state still does face is methamphetamine. Although we've made some tremendous strides, we've had some real success in driving down the number of meth labs in Iowa, we still see a high amount of methamphetamine being trafficked into our communities and through our state. Another challenge that we face, which is a constantly emerging one, is a synthetic drug threat. And these also present a very unique challenge because they are often sold in neighborhood stores. They are synthetic cocaine, synthetic marijuana. They're labeled as safe. They're labeled as really commonplace household items that people, a lot of parents in many cases, don't even know are coming into their homes as a dangerous substance. An ever-present challenge we have is alcohol. Unfortunately, alcohol is a really widely abused substance in the youth population, in the youth community, which can really be a dangerous trend-setting pattern that we want children to avoid. Last but certainly not least is marijuana. Although many people tend to think of marijuana as a less dangerous drug, we see a huge challenge in our youth population. Over 60% of our youth who are in drug treatment are there for marijuana. This is not the same marijuana that it was 20, 30 years ago. The marijuana on the streets today is often much more potent. It is a very strong, highly concentrated THC content in the marijuana you find today, and it is not the harmless drug that many make it out to be.
Is there any one drug that you would say is more important than another one to be concerned with?
That's a really good question, Peter. There really, from our perspective, there isn't a silver bullet solution. There isn't a single drug that is the most dangerous. Many of these things actually work in concert with each other. For example, when you do a meth lab bust, when you arrest somebody for trafficking meth, oftentimes they have large amounts of marijuana with them as well. There are a lot of ways that these drugs all tie together and that the culture of drug use ties together. It spills over into some really dangerous things like human trafficking. We often see money laundering and financial crimes involved with drugs as well. So the challenge is multifaceted. It's about people making the wrong life choices. It's about people moving in the wrong direction with their lives. And we really want to try to focus on getting youth to recognize those threats and avoiding them.
If you had a quick tip that you could share with parents, what would it be?
I think that oftentimes parents underestimate the power they have to change the future of their children for the better. Having a short, meaningful conversation with your child, or an older brother having a conversation with a younger brother, trying to set a good example, can set that child on a much better life path, help strengthen them to make better life choices, to avoid that peer pressure. Because we know when we can keep kids healthy and drug-free, until about age 21, you almost guarantee they will never become drug abusers later in life. So much focus is spent by the government, by the public sector, to try to prevent drug abuse in teens. And parents have a huge position to make a huge positive impact in the lives of their teens and in the future of our state, just by having those conversations, becoming more involved, spending time with their kids, and trying to steer them in the right direction.
Well, we know that you spend a great deal of time working on behalf of the youth of Iowa to ensure there are strong drug policies, and we thank you. We thank you for your insights, and we hope to have you on future shows to talk about some of these threats.
Love to be back.
Some synthetic drugs may be called fake marijuana, but their threat to the health and safety of Iowans is real. Synthetic drugs are doubly dangerous because they make people sick, and teenagers think they're safe. As a father and grandfather, I urge all parents to learn about synthetic drugs and talk to your kids about their dangers now. Get help at drugfreeiowa.org or call toll-free 866-242-4111.
Kids go through phases, but Jeremy went through painkillers, bottles of vodka, and his mom's purse when he needed more. The story of addiction is all too familiar, but you can change it.
Don't forget to tip him.
I know, Mom. I know.
If you or someone you know is in recovery from addiction, share your story with the Partnership at drugfree.org, because your story can change someone else's.
After Kylie used coke, she stopped caring about school, friends, or who she had to steal from to get more of it. The story of addiction is all too familiar, but you can change it.
Sleeping in, Dad?
If you or someone you know is in recovery from addiction, share your story with the Partnership at drugfree.org, because your story can change someone else's.
Welcome back to Drugs and Children. Today we have a special guest, Hanna Voy, 18-year-old Hanna Voy, who has quite a story to tell. Hanna, how did you get started with your experience in substance abuse?
I was just a normal 15-year-old girl. I participated in volleyball, basketball, and track. I got good grades. I made it on the honor roll. I made it to state in track, and I was just a normal 15-year-old. And around the end of my freshman year, my parents went through a divorce, and it wasn't a very easy divorce for me. And I didn't know how to cope. My dad was so hurt, and my dad had been my best friend my whole life. And seeing him hurt, I just didn't know what to do. I didn't want to go home because I didn't want to see my dad like that. So I discovered alcohol, and I would drink. And I would stay over at friends' house just so I wouldn't have to go home, and I wouldn't have to be around the situation. I just wanted to put it all out of my mind. I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want nothing to do with it. I just wanted to forget about it, pretend it never happened. So I would drink, and that's how I coped. I'd just drink, and I'd drink. And my dad, he was just so hurt by what had happened that he was just trying to focus on being a good parent, and he wasn't gonna say, come home, what are you doing? Because he didn't know what to do. He was just, and our family was just so hurt. And so basically it just got out of hand, and my dad just didn't know what to do. He was just gone through a nasty divorce, and his youngest daughter was abusing alcohol, and he didn't know what to do. So he basically put me in treatment. And when I got to ASAC, which is a rehab facility, I just didn't understand. I just did not understand how he could do that to me. How could my dad put me in a treatment facility? And I was so upset with him. I was so mad at him. I told him I hated him. I didn't want anything to do with him. Don't come visit me. Don't call me, nothing. I don't want anything to do with you. Just leave me alone. I hate you. That's basically what it was. And from going from being my best friend, who I told everything to telling him I hated him, was just awful. Like, it was an awful feeling knowing that I'd lost my dad, basically, because I couldn't control my drinking. And it took a while for me, while I was in treatment, to understand that it was helping me. Treatment was to help me. It wasn't him punishing me in any way. He was trying to help me to get his daughter back. And So I eventually figured all that out, and I just decided that's not what I want to do. I don't want to drink. I don't want to lose my dad. That's not what I want. He doesn't deserve that. He just lost his wife. His family got torn apart, and I don't want to lose him. So when I got out of ASAC, everything was good for a couple months, and we were getting along, and it was all okay, but I was just so mad at the situation still. I was so mad at what my mom had done to our family. And so I was like, I'm not going to drink again. That's not what I want to do. I don't want to lose my dad. That's not me. That's not me. That's not who I am as a person. I was a good person. And when my grades went, I was a 4.0 student, and they dropped, and I was failing classes, and I just didn't care. I didn't want to do anything. So I told everyone I'm not drinking anymore because my friends all drank. That's not what I want to do. And I got introduced to marijuana, and I was like, okay, this isn't alcohol, so it's not that big a deal. You know, that's what I got told. It's not alcohol. You can do it. You just can't drink. You can do this. I was like, okay.
Where were you the first time you were exposed to marijuana?
I was actually in my friend's car, and we were coming back from McDonald's, and she's just like, do you want to try this? And I was like, I don't think so. She's like, well, it's not alcohol. You can't drink, but you can try this. She's like, it's not bad, I promise. And because I would get so angry when I drink, she's like, it makes you happy. And I was like, okay, I'll try it. And after the first time I tried marijuana, that was it. I was hooked. I was hooked on it. And it went from just, oh, I'll do it when I'm around it, to I would do anything I could to get a hold of it. And I would do whatever it takes to be able to get high, to be able to smoke marijuana. And I lied to my dad. I lied, and because I didn't want to lose my dad again, but I didn't want him to know that I was doing drugs. That's not something that I ever wanted to have to tell my dad, that, hey, I'm doing drugs. And I lied to him for a long time, but he knew. He had to have known I wasn't the same person. And basically, things just got bad again with my dad and I. And I didn't want, it was just the main thing for me is I did not want to lose my dad. He never gave up on me, but I could tell he was just so disappointed in me that that's not who I want to be.
Where did you find the strongest support when you were dealing with the problem to help you get out of it?
Definitely just motivating myself to not lose my relationship I have with my father. My dad has always been there for me. He never gave up on me the whole time I was in treatment. He's always been there, and he's never given up. And when I was smoking marijuana, I just felt like he was giving up, and that was just an awful feeling. So something clicked. It was like, I need to be done.
Well, I'd like to be able to get in depth a little bit about some of the experiences you had with your friends and how this affected you. Would you be willing to come back?
Yeah.
Great. We'll have you a little later in the show. Stay with us. We have special guest Eric Foster, the Lynn County Prevention Specialist, coming. We look forward to seeing you there.
Please listen carefully. This is for real. We will save the life of a child. There are dangerous drugs in the hands of young children in Iowa. Synthetic drugs, sometimes called fake marijuana, and bath salts. They are in our communities and schools. Talk to your children now. Get help at drugfreeiowa.org.
Watching your sister go through withdrawal is the last thing you expect to do. You hope she gets past it, but worry she'll relapse. The story of addiction is all too familiar, but you can change it.
That's 2 out of 3.
If you or someone you know is in recovery from addiction, share your story with the Partnership at drugfree.org, because your story can change someone else's.
You may have heard about synthetic drugs in the news and the fact that more Iowa teenagers who use them are ending up in the hospital. Synthetic drugs can be dangerous, but you can help prevent the threat. Learn about synthetic drugs and talk with your kids now. For sale does not mean safe to use.
Get help at drugfreeiowa.org.
Welcome back to Drugs and Children. We have with us Erin Foster, the Linn County Director of Prevention Services. Welcome to the show, Erin.
Thank you.
Erin, you have a very unique perspective. You have a lot of experience in prevention, and yet you're young. That's got to help you connect with children.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how it works with you. I mean, do you get the kind of respect you need to get the job done there?
I think so. I think being a young professional in the prevention world has its definite challenges, but it has its fun times too. I enjoy going in and talking to kids. They do give me a little bit of credibility because I'm a little bit closer to their age. Compared to some other people that have come to talk, but the challenges do come with parents and discussing with parents what I believe is going on in the prevention world and ways that they can help their kids out.
When you look at children in the community that you meet, and obviously you've met children that have seen a lot of things that they probably would not like to have seen, what kind of response do you get with parents in terms of prevention and how they want to stay involved with these issues with their children?
Right. Prevention has changed quite a bit over the years. We used to just go in and do one-time presentations, whether with kids or with parents in the community, keep them up to date on trends and different things that we're seeing. We're looking at it and changing our ways because we understand that we can go in and have these 1 hour, hour and a half talks with whether it's kids or parents, but once those talks are done, everybody goes back out into the community. And if we don't change the community in which everyone lives in and change the environment and change the culture that we live in, there's really going to be no macro level changes.
What are some of the questions that children ask you today?
Children ask a lot of questions today. They ask different things as, you know, well, I know someone who used and he or she's fully functioning adult, and, you know, if I make this decision now, I have plenty of times to change, you know, how it's going to affect my future, and sometimes that's not the case.
What about parents?
Parents ask very similar questions, but they also tend to go back to their childhoods a little bit and say, well, I smoked marijuana and I turned out fine, or it's a rite of passage that I had when I was youth and I feel the same should happen to my kids. So there's a little bit different questions when it comes to parents as to what they think they should allow their kids to do.
If you had to look at the threats that are out there, and we've heard Steve Lucan talk about the top 5, how do you see these affecting children today? Is there any one threat you see more prevalent than another?
Really can't say that there's one threat. The issue with substance abuse, and I think that Steve touched on it too, was they're all encompassing, and just because one child may use one drug does not mean that they won't lead into another one or that they're not experimenting with other ones at the same time. The other issue we see with youth substance abuse, it tends to touch different areas in their life, whether it's mental health or crime rates or health in general, that type of thing, that substance abuse can touch a lot of different things in the community.
Very interesting. You know, we have many cases of people, the social norms you talked about, thinking, well, I did alcohol or I smoked marijuana. It seems to me that they're all really strong threats to the well-being of children, that there are no, you know, more liberal or loose, you know, you can't really relax the rules because, you know, as we heard from Hanna, you can start with alcohol and then end up, you know, smoking marijuana, and we've heard countless cases of this happening. Is that getting through to parents?
I think the one thing that we need to get through to parents when it comes to that thing is that their child is not exempt from anything. This does not, substance abuse does not pick and choose specific things they're looking for. It does not just pick the at-risk kid. It does not pick the child who had the parents go through divorce. Nobody is exempt from this. And so you may be a straight-A student, you may be the athlete, you may be the artist. It can touch anybody. And I think that these preventative methods that we're looking at a community level can help with that because it touches and looks at everything going on in the environment.
And so children get that as well.
Yes, yes.
Well, that's heartwarming. Thank you very much.
No problem.
We appreciate what you've had to say. Now you've heard another side of the story on drugs and children. Stay with us. We're going to be back with Hanna and learn a little bit more about some of the experiences she went through. Parents, stay close to this because I think she's got some important stuff to say.
After Kylie used coke, she stopped caring about school, friends, or who she had to steal from to get more of it. The story of addiction is all too familiar, but you can change it.
Sleeping in, Dad?
If you or someone you know is in recovery from addiction, share your story with the Partnership at drugfree.org, because your story can change someone else's.
Some synthetic drugs may may be called fake marijuana, but their threat to the health and safety of Iowans is real. Synthetic drugs are doubly dangerous because they make people sick, and teenagers think they're safe. As a father and grandfather, I urge all parents to learn about synthetic drugs and talk to your kids about their dangers now. Get help at drugfreeiowa.org or call toll-free 866-242-4111.
Watching your sister go through withdrawal is the last thing you expect to do. You hope she gets past it, but worry she'll relapse. The story of addiction is all too familiar, but you can change it.
That's 2 out of 3.
If you or someone you know is in recovery from addiction, share your story with the Partnership at drugfree.org, because your story can change someone else's.
Welcome back to Drugs and Children. We have back with us Hanna Voy. At 18 years of age, she has quite a story to tell. Hanna, if you could go back to that first incident, to a time before you did alcohol, and you could step back into your life or somebody else's life, what would you say or do that might help them?
Is it worth it? Is it really worth it? Like, if I would know what's going to happen in the long run, knowing that I would lose that relationship I had with my father, is it really worth it to feel that high or that being drunk? Is that worth losing your family or losing your relationship with your father?
Now, would you have believed that if somebody said that to you?
No. At the time, no. I was just so upset that I was just doing whatever it took to get my mind off things.
So let's try again. You're basically saying the advice I give, I wouldn't have taken. What could you do?
I think for me, I was just so hard-headed that I just couldn't listen. I wouldn't listen to anyone. And even my dad would try to talk to me. He'd just talk to me, and I just wouldn't even talk to him. Not even about using drugs or alcohol. He'd just want to talk, and I was just so upset. But I wasn't upset with him. I was just upset with the situation. And I just didn't want to listen to anything anyone had to say. And I wish there would have been someone to just tell me it's not worth it. It's not. Don't do it. It's not going to be worth it in the long run. You think it's good now. You think you're having a good time. But in the long run, it is not worth it.
Did your parents know your friends?
Yes and no. I mean, my dad knew something was off. I don't think he knew exactly to the extent of what I was doing and to the extent of my using and how bad it got. But I do think that he knew that I was not hanging out with the right people.
Now, did they know them, though? Are these friends that you had then that you were growing up with?
No.
So you sort of made new friends when you...
Yeah. I would say I had friends that they knew, and they were good friends, but they didn't use. So when I started using, I moved on to a different friend group. And my dad's not going to judge me for my friends, but at the same time, he knew something was wrong, but he's not going to be like, you can't hang out with him. So I just wish that I would have known that it was all going to lead up to nothing. Like, all that fun I thought I was having was not worth it. It was not worth it in the end.
Now, as I understand it, you'd have a chance to meet with other children. You try and help with other children that have problems?
Yes, I go up and I speak occasionally up at ASAC CD+, and I just tell them my story and my struggles and how I overcame them and how my dad basically was my biggest motivation. And I just think that kids don't realize that your family is number one. Your family's always going to be in your life.
Is there something your dad could have done to break through what was happening with you?
I mean, I don't even know, because he was so hurt from the divorce that I think he was just lost at the time. And he did whatever he could to get through to me and to make my life easier for me and make sure we could go on a vacation and make sure that I had my wants. But I don't know, it hurt me so bad to see how hurt he was that I was doing whatever it took to just get it out of my mind. And if he would have just, I think, just sat down with me and like we would have just discussed it and talked about it, and if he told me how he, because he doesn't like to talk about his feelings, if he would have just told me how actually upset and hurt he was, and if we could have just discussed it, and I don't know, I think that would have made it a little bit easier on me, because I knew he was hurting, but he wouldn't tell me how bad he was hurting. And that was what was hard for me, is to know how upset he was, but to not be able to do anything about it.
So one of the things that people talk about is taking time to have really good discussions with their children.
Mm-hmm.
And parents say it's hard. And a lot of parents that think they've had that discussion, and the children are saying, oh, they didn't talk to me about this. Now, you've gone through that with your dad. Have you since been able to talk about that experience and share that? Has he heard the words that you just told me?
No. I mean, not to that extent of what I just told you. We're very close, and we can talk about anything, but it's just a subject that we don't often bring up together because of all the pain that it caused both of us. And we have talked about it, but not to the extent of, he doesn't know how much it hurt me to see him hurt, I don't think.
And this was the way you could cope?
Yeah.
And it didn't work?
It did not work. It just tore me, and it made him hurt worse because it tore me and his relationship apart, and that hurt him. He had just lost his wife, and now he was losing his daughter, and that hurt him worse. So what I was doing to help me was actually hurting him worse.
How many other children have you encountered that have gone through similar experiences?
Quite a few. I mean, everyone has their own story and everyone has their own struggles, but it's always the same thing. They're using to cover something up. They're using to get rid of the pain or to hide how they're actually feeling. They're not using for anything but their own selfishness. Like, that's basically it.
So you make a strong point that parents communicating feelings is really important to dealing with some of these challenges.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you sharing our story with us. The problem of youth substance abuse has staggering numbers associated with it. Join us as we journey through the threats that our children face today. Unlike a tornado, we can do something about youth substance abuse. See you next time on Drugs and Children, Secrets for Parents.